Councillor at Campaspe Shire. Really excited to see everyone here today. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands on which we all meet today, which is all over Victoria. I'd like to acknowledge their rich culture and connection to country and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. Campaspe Shire, we are on the lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung, Taungurung and Yorta Yorta peoples. So welcome to everyone, mayors, councillors, CEOs and council staff from across Victoria for this special meeting of the Disaster Ready Fund, round 3. So we thought we'd get EMV to come in and have a chat to us to give us an idea of what they're looking for and what perhaps we should be doing. So I'd like to welcome Sally Jamieson, who's the Acting Manager, Emergency Management Policy and Objectives, Billy Mazza, who's a Senior Policy Officer, and Owen Segersma, who's a Policy Officer. As we know, particularly rural Victorians are hit by disasters on a regular basis, and it's been just seems like a fairly constant over a very long period of time, but particularly over the last 4 or 5 years. And right across Australia, though, we can see it happening in Queensland as we speak with the floods, and even over in northwest Western Australia with the Category 5 cyclone, which has got incredibly strong winds about to hit Port Hedland over there. So this is becoming more common, and therefore adaptation is going to become more and more important, and getting ready for these disasters. So stage 3 is about to open. I know Campaspe Shire has applied for these grants in the past and been successful, and so I think they're very valuable to all our shires moving forward to help protect our communities and our council assets. I will hand over to Sally, I think.
Thank you. We thought we'd just start with a bit of an overview of kind of the program and some key changes. Billy will run you through that. And then it's pretty much we can be open to questions from you guys if there's anything in particular that you want to tackle. And we're happy to share the presentation in addition to obviously the recording and to have future conversations as well as you go through the process. So I'll hand it over to Billy, but I'll do the share screen at my end.
Thanks, Sally. All right. So today I'm going to be providing everyone with an overview of round 3 of the Disaster Ready Fund. So things I'm going to highlight is information about what's continued from previous rounds and some of the changes that NEMA have brought in for round 3. I'm going to talk to some of the application requirements, and I'm also going to provide you an overview with the administration of round 3 and the next steps from this stage. Thanks, Ellie. So for those who aren't familiar with the Disaster Ready Fund, I'll just give you a bit of a quick overview, but the DRF is meant to be the Commonwealth Government's flagship disaster resilience and risk reduction initiative, which has been designed to establish a comprehensive set of disaster resilience and mitigation projects across Australia. The DRF has 3 objectives, so that is to increase the understanding of natural hazard disaster impacts as a first step towards reducing disaster impacts in the future, increasing the resilience, adaptive capacity and or preparedness of governments, community service organisations and affected communities to minimise the potential impacts of natural hazards and avert disasters, and to reduce the exposure to risk, harm and or severity of natural hazard impacts. As you can see on screen, there'll be $200 million dispensed annually by the Commonwealth Government, which will be $1 billion in total over 5 years. Next slide. Thanks, Ellie. And we can probably skip to the next one. So in round 3 of the DRF, it'll continue to have the same objectives as previous rounds and continue to be underpinned by 4 investment principles. These investment principles are to ensure the Commonwealth's investment is aligned to evidence-based state, territory and national risk and resilience planning, and to support a diverse distribution of funding. These principles have been embedded in the assessment criteria for the program. In January, round 3 officially opened, and on that day, the Commonwealth released their application guidelines. On the same day, Emergency Management Victoria also released a set of guidelines, and now these two sets of guidelines are meant to be read in conjunction with one another. So if you haven't already, I do encourage everyone to have a read of them. The actual application platform will be Smarty Grants, and that will be available through EMV's DRF webpage. And there's a link on screen which you'll have access to once we send out this PowerPoint to everyone. And something to be mindful of is that round 3 is closing 5 p.m. on the 2nd of April 2025. Probably one of the more important things to highlight are the changes that have come in as part of round 3. NEMA have introduced quite a number of them. Over the next 2 slides, I'll talk to some of them. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's the things that we believe, I guess, are significant and you should be made aware of. So there has been an increased focus on infrastructure. So the Commonwealth has notionally committed 138 million for infrastructure projects. As part of that, they've brought in a requirement that infrastructure projects need to have a minimum project value of $500,000. They've also extended the duration in which an infrastructure project can be. So previously it was only up to 3 years, now it can be up to 5 years. The remainder of the funding, the 59 million, has been allocated to non-infrastructure projects, but these projects still can only be up to 3 years. Another really significant change that they've brought in this year is an application cap for all lead agencies. So the way it previously worked is that applications would be submitted, and then an emergency management panel at the Victorian level would assess all the applications, and they would rate them as highly suitable, suitable, or not suitable. All applications that were rated highly suitable or suitable would then be sent to the Commonwealth for consideration. That can't happen this time because of the cap that NEMA have introduced. So Victoria will only be able to put up 60 applications, and so we believe it's going to be a much more competitive process this time round. Another change that's brought in is, I guess, the removal of the 100% waiver. Previously, you could apply to have a 100% waiver for the co-contribution, and now they've brought in a tiered approach, which I'll talk to in more detail further into the presentation. Sally, if you could flick onto the next slide. Some of the other big changes is a requirement for all applicants to provide a clear business case for their proposal, which should include a project plan, a budget, and a risk management plan. There's another requirement for all projects with a value of over $1 million to have cost estimates prepared, and they need to be prepared by a quantity surveyor or other relevant professional. For projects under $1 million, these cost estimates and quotes can be prepared by the applicant. And for infrastructure specific applications, there's a requirement to also submit a cost benefit analysis for the application. On screen now are the natural hazard types. Not much has changed from the previous round, so those who have been involved would be pretty familiar with this list, which is also on the application guidelines. It's not a definitive list, so there can be other types of natural hazards, but it's worth highlighting that droughts, biological and virological hazards, and cyber attacks aren't eligible for this program. On screen now are the activity types, and you can see the division between the infrastructure projects and the non-infrastructure projects and the allocation of notional funding. The definitions of each of the infrastructure activity types is in the application guidelines. So if you want more detail about what's actually involved in things like grey infrastructure or green-blue infrastructure, that information is available in the guidelines. In terms of eligible expenditure, I think the thing to focus on most is that it must be a direct cost for the project. In the Victorian application guide, there's actually examples of this, but it would include things like staff salaries and costs, construction or procurement of material costs, planning costs. But NEMA have told us that escalation costs and contingency costs shouldn't be factored into the budgets for these projects. In terms of ineligible expenditure, one of the things to keep in mind is that business as usual activities, and there's actually a definition of that provided in the guidelines, wouldn't count as eligible expenditure, as well as things like the maintenance of existing machinery or infrastructure, or the repair and replacement of existing infrastructure where there's no demonstrated significant increase in benefit, and projects that have already been given full funding through another funding stream. So they're just things to keep in mind about when calculating expenditure for the project. As I touched on earlier, there's tiered co-contribution requirements now in place of the 100% waiver. So as you can see on screen, First Nation organisations and local councils that are located in the very remote or remote locations as per the Australian Bureau of Statistics remoteness structure, they only need to provide a minimum co-contribution of at least 10%. For councils in low rate based councils, or not-for-profit organisations, they need to only provide a minimum co-contribution of at least 20%, and then pretty much for everyone else, it's a 50% co-contribution, which has been pretty standard throughout the process. In terms of the councils that fall into the low-rate based councils, I believe it's Loddon Shire and West Wimmera or East Wimmera Shire, but the exact list is in the NEMA application guidelines. So more details about co-contributions. So applicants and any or all delivery partners are required to contribute towards the project, and they can make different types of co-contributions. So these can be financial or cash co-contributions, in-kind co-contributions, so things like staff wages, the supply of material, supplies, materials, and equipment that you already have on hand that you would use to execute the project, and historical investments. So these are funds that the applicant has already invested in a program or project on or after the 1st of July 2023, where the Australian government's contribution from the DRF is expected to extend or enhance the program or project, subject to the alignment of DRF objectives. No more than 50% of the co-contribution can be derived from historical investments. So if you need to provide a 50% co-contribution, 25% of, I guess, the total project costs can't come from, no more than 25% of the total project costs can come from historical investment. In terms of, Sally, could you please flick to the next slide? So Australian government funding as contributions. The Australian government funding from any source cannot be used to contribute to the minimum co-contribution requirements except for financial assistance provided to local governments under the Australian government's financial assistance grants program. So if you intend to use funding from that, that's something to keep in mind. Consultation requirements. These are pretty similar to what's been previously used in the grant program. So for place-based projects, applicants must meaningfully consult with relevant local governments and affected communities, including affected First Nations communities, unless there is a compelling reason not to do so. And just on that, so for example, an infrastructure upgrade or project on land owned by an applicant, where the applicant is also the relevant local council. So if local council's doing a project on their own land, you don't need to provide any evidence of engagement, but I thought I'd just make that clear. And then the other consultation requirement is for projects that affect the particular interests of First Nation communities. So you must meaningfully consult with the relevant First Nation communities if their particular interests are affected by a proposed project, for example, in ways that are not felt by the general population, irrespective of whether the project is place-based, unless there's a compelling reason not to do so. And NEMA have not provided us an example of a compelling reason for not doing this. So if you are interested, if you need more detail on that, we can chase that up with NEMA. Just please send us an email. So the assessment criterion. So there's 3 criterion, which is very similar to previous years. So the first one is you need to demonstrate how the project is going to contribute to disaster risk reduction, resilience, and/or knowledge. For criterion 2, you need to demonstrate how the project aligns with national, state, territorial, local disaster resilience and risk reduction plans, strategies, or frameworks. And I believe in the application guides, there's a list of those policies and frameworks, so you can lean on those. For the third criterion, there's a bit more involved. So the project needs to so the applicant needs to demonstrate their capacity, capability, and the resources to actually deliver the project. And so there's a range of ways that you can demonstrate that, which is on screen. But in terms of the evidence for when responding to this criterion, as I mentioned earlier, a clear business case for the application is required, which needs a project plan, budget, and risk management plan, and it needs to be commensurate with the scale and size of the project. So a very basic project doesn't need to be the supporting evidence doesn't need to be as involved as something compared to a multi-million-dollar project. And then if the project is worth more than $1 million, you need cost estimates by a quantity surveyor or other relevant professional. Sally, if you could go to the next one. So there are also additional requirements when responding to this for infrastructure projects. So you must demonstrate how the infrastructure and benefits of the project will be operated and maintained into the future, as well as the steps taken to get the project ready, and evidence to support this. As I touched on earlier, again, we need to see a cost-benefit analysis, copies of the relevant designs and approvals, and evidence that the applicant either owns the land or the infrastructure being built. In terms of the administration, as I said earlier, round 3 will close on Wednesday, the 2nd of April at 5 p.m, not midnight. That has caught people out in the past, so again, something to keep in mind. As with rounds 1 and 2, the applications will be received via Smarty grants. Successful projects will likely be announced by NEMA in September 2025, but this timeline is subject to change. I believe there's also an election between now and then, so that's something to keep in mind. Although projects should be ideally shovel ready at the time that the schedules are signed, it is likely that payments of grant funding will not commence for successful applicants until at least early 2026. In terms of who's administering the project, it's the EMV DRF team, which currently is myself, Sally, and Sonia, who's not online at the moment. We're accessible via the email that's on screen. So we're happy to take all your inquiries. We're happy to meet with you all individually to discuss your projects. We're here to help you put the best project forward. So do not hesitate to reach out to us. We'll also be hosting a range of a couple of Q&A sessions for applicants. So if you are interested in attending these, they just sort of drop-in sessions, just send us an email and we'll forward you an invite. And yeah, we can answer any of your questions there as well. And that's it for the presentation. So we're happy to field any of your questions and discuss anything that you'd like.
No worries. Thanks, Billy.
No.
Do we have any questions out there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, it's Emma McPherson here from Mansfield Shire. Given that there's the limitation of 60 applications to be put forward, how many for Victoria? How many were put forward in round 1 or round 2?
For round one, I don't remember off the top of my head. For round two, I believe there was a 110 or 111 applications put up to the Commonwealth, but keep in mind that only 70 of those were considered highly suitable.
Thank you. So it is quite an impact, isn't it? If you've done
Yeah.
almost double in the last round, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be much more competitive this time around.
Right. And thank you.
So Billy, by that with it's the same amount of money but a whole lot less. Does it sound like they're looking for larger projects?
It does seem like that's where they're heading. I think the way they've structured things, that they're looking for large scale infrastructure projects is sort of what they want this year.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from across those online? Paul?
Yep.
Hello, Paul Diffie from Werris Shire Council. Just got questions about the type of infrastructure projects. So are you looking for, say, retention basins or levee banks, or is it something much more smaller, such as, say, emergency resilience centres, or what type of themes are you really looking for in terms of the infrastructure you're wanting us to be investing in?
So NEMA haven't provided any specific guidance on what they're looking for, and I just want to clarify that NEMA will be the ones that will be making the final determination. Emergency Management Victoria is more just a facilitator of this process, but the types of infrastructure that you just highlighted there, I think meets the definitions of grey infrastructure, which they touch on in the application guideline.
You can sort of stricter with science.
So apologies, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yep. So I think what you touched on there seems to align with grey infrastructure, which that would fall into the category of the general infrastructure allotment of money. So I'd imagine those sorts of projects are what they're looking for.
No worries. Thanks for that. Kate? Berg?
Possibly Emma again, if it's Kate from Mansfield. Sorry, yeah.
Okay, yep.
Yep. So Emma again. Just regarding the consultation and evidence, we've got a multi-million-dollar project we want to put forward, and we own the land that it's on, but it's also a multi-agency project. So we would have letters of support and the like as evidence of consultation. But do you need consultation? You say that there's no evidence required if it's being built on council-owned land. Just clarify that, sorry.
Yep. And Sally, feel free to jump in if I misrepresent this. But so because is it going to be built on land that your council own? Was that what I heard?
That's right. So we own the land. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So you would include that in the application, but you would need if it's going to be sort of done in partnership with other councils or organisations, you'll need letters of support from them. Talking about like basically confirming that their engagement for it. If they are going to be contributing to the project as well, there's a letter of support template that NEMA have brought out, which basically outlines for partner agencies that, yep, we support this project and this is the type of work that we'll be doing, or this is how we're going to contribute to the project, and this is our co-contribution to it as well. So I think there's a little table in the letter that your partners can fill out. One thing to highlight as well is that co-contributions from partners, they don't need to be, I guess, 100% confirmed at this stage. It can be in principle support, but everything will need to be confirmed once you're signing the schedules and contracts for the funding, if it all gets up.
Thank you. I think, and we do have extensive community consultation to show for a need for what we're putting forward. I'm guessing that would be good supportive evidence to put in, even though it's not necessary as we own the land.
I think so. Yeah, I think that would be good.
Thank you.
All good.
Thanks, Emma. Any other questions from Billy or from anyone else from the team today? No other questions at this stage. All right, thank you very much for that, Billy, Sally, and Owen. Really appreciate you coming on board. So you'll send that pack to us, I think, and we'll forward that on to all our members. Obviously, there's that email address where people can reach out to you if they need any. So you said you'll be doing some more Q&As, is that right?
Yep, I believe the next one is the 18th, and I think they run fortnightly from there. So if anyone wants an invite from that, just email the DRF email and we'll forward the invite on.
Right, yeah. Maybe you could send, when you send everything to Kate, you could send those dates as well or something like that, and we'll get them out to everyone as well. So
absolutely.
So everyone's got that on file. All right, thanks a lot for coming along today, everyone. As I said, I think we know this is a pretty important topic for all our rural councils, and it can be big investment, but I think longer term, it's certainly worthwhile investment that we need to make to help protect our communities. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and we'll hopefully see you all a bit later.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye all.
everyone.
See you.
Thank
Bye.
you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.